Hiya friends, Prepared Suburbanite, back at you. Hey, I got a question for you. If you were to, of your own volition, start your prepping journey all over again, what would you do differently to make it a whole lot better than it is right now? I've got some thoughts. We talked about this around the dinner table a little bit about what we would have done differently, and I want to share a few of those thoughts with you right after this. So the first thing on my mind would be location. I would have chosen, I think if prepping was my long-term goal, rather than the rationale behind the decision that we made when we bought this particular property, if I'd have had a long-term goal in mind that was about being prepared, I would not have purchased a home in a homeowners association driven development in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina. The reason that we did is that I was a consultant and my job required me to fly all over the country, California and Montana and Florida and New England and Texas and Minnesota. I've been all over. I've been everywhere, man. Anyway, the driving force was having a home that was close enough to the airport, and that's why we chose this one. Because it was, we're only about 10 miles away from Raleigh-Durham International Airport, and that airport can get me pretty much anywhere in the United States or anywhere in the world for that matter. So that's the driving factor on why we're here now. At my age, it's a little bit late to go changing that, but it's always nice to go back and say, what could things have been like if we had made a different set of decisions? And here's what I would have done differently. I would have purchased a piece of property with a minimum of 10 to 20 acres out in rural America, whether that would be Western Pennsylvania, Northern Pennsylvania, West Virginia. There are some beautiful, beautiful spots in those areas there. Sort of back home for my wife and me. But it would have been nice to have a 20-acre plot there, a big old farmhouse on it that we could have turned into a real homestead. So the longer term goal would have been to change prepping into homesteading. And by that I mean that we would probably be raising livestock, chickens for sure, goats, I don't know about that, but maybe, pigs for sure, to have that for the pork and the bacon. Maybe even a beef cattle or something. I don't know. If the land could support that, that's what I'd be doing. I would have invested a lot of the extra money that we had. We were both working and enjoyed a fairly decent income during our working careers, and I would have taken a few of those extra dollars and invested it in the equipment that I would need to do proper homesteading. I would have had a tractor with a lot of the attachments that were necessary to really get the job done, a grapple and a backhoe and a front loader and that kind of a thing. I'm not sure I'd quite go as far as having a excavator or anything like that, but sure would be nice to have had a really good tractor to be able to maintain and work the homestead. The other investment I think I would have done if the land was anywhere near wooded property and we had 40 acres or so of decent woods, 20 acres that was maybe cleared enough to do gardening and raising livestock on, I would have invested, I think, in a log splitter. And we would have been able to use that kind of investment possibly as a side gig to make money in the future when we did retire. The other things that I would have invested in would have been in prepping itself. I would have invested earlier and a lot more in making sure that I had the right kind of investment in our storage, in our shelving, and I would have invested some of that extra income that we had on the tools that were found to be necessary during our current prepping journey. I would have made sure that we had plenty of canning jars and canning lids. Right now I don't have any extras, so we're now searching at local hardware stores and rummage sales and places like that, trying to pick up extra canning jars, and they're kind of hard to find and they're getting a lot more expensive. I wish I had invested in that kind of stuff a whole lot earlier in my journey. The other tools that are necessary, the canning equipment, like I said, the canner itself, I would have loved to have an All-American. Right now we've got Prestos, and they seem to work okay, but it's because we've got an electric glass top stove, and the All-Americans don't, what we understand anyway, don't necessarily work all that well on the glass top electric stoves. So we stayed with the Prestos. I would love to have had in my dream prepper scenario a gas-fired stove that we could use the better equipment, the All-Americans, which I think are really top-notch. So I would have invested in that kind of stuff. Dehydrators, I've got one now, and it does okay for dehydrating, but boy, it sucks up a ton of electricity when you're using it, and you got to run it for a long, long time. So I'd be on the market or on the lookout for a lot more efficient dehydrators, and maybe scrap the whole dehydrator idea and move to freeze dries. And I think a freeze dryer might be a terrific way to go. It could very well be, but the tools that are necessary to be successful as a prepper, I would have invested in a whole lot earlier in my journey. I would have spent some extra time investing in the tools and the equipment that I need for my hobbies. I love photography, and I love sitting out in the woods with the camera and taking pictures of wildlife, looking for landscape photography opportunities, and just enjoyed it. But I never really had a good camera with a good zoom lens, telephoto kind of a lens, until just about a year and a half ago. I would have invested some extra money back in the 80s to develop my yearn for photography. Back in the 80s, I used to hunt a lot. I used to carry a rifle and carry a bow during hunting season. And once I started taking the camera out into the woods, that surpassed my my desire to kill the animals. I'd much rather take pictures of them, and that lasts a lot longer. It doesn't add to the caloric intake, but the guys that I was carrying the camera with, they were always willing to share some of the bounty that they got when they took some of the local wildlife on their hunting permits. So I would have invested in photography and the right equipment for photography. I'm enjoying it now. The other hobby that I've got is a little bit of woodworking, and I never really had any of the tools until maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I invested in a table saw, a drill press, a planer, the miter saw, that kind of a thing. So I would have invested a lot more money and a whole lot earlier in my journey. I was thinking kind of in the back of my mind that, you got to have a side gig, sort of. You don't need to, but it's always nice to have a side gig that can bring in a couple extra bucks here and there. And woodworking can be one of those side gigs that can come in pretty handy. You need somebody that, if you have a talent to create classy stuff, and I've done a number of American flag replicas out of wood, found it very enjoyable to do that kind of stuff. And you know what? They sell for 100 or 150 bucks, and you got maybe 20 bucks worth of material and a couple hours worth of time in there. Yeah, you can make some money doing that kind of stuff, and that's just one of the examples. I would have striven to be a lot more self-sufficient. Right now, where we are, I guess, subject to receiving our energy from the local power companies for natural gas, for electricity, for municipal entities, for water. If I was to have started my prepper journey all over again, I would have made sure that I had secondary backups for each of those major themes. We only got into propane recently, and I've been investing currently in making sure that the propane that we've got here and the stoves and things that we are using that attach to propane, that use propane as fuel, that I think is very important. When the power goes out, you gotta have some backup. So we've invested in propane, tanks and the actual propane itself, and feeling fairly confident. Still got a ways to go, I think, with that. Solar, I think, is a great alternative to making sure you've got some backup when the power goes out. We've got a couple of good solar panels, actually 4 of them, 100 watts apiece, so we got 400 watts solar out there, and it's enough to recharge the solar generators, which aren't really generators, they're battery storage devices, but you can charge them back up on the solar. I've done it, it works pretty darn well. So I would have invested probably a lot more in that to make sure that I was as self-sufficient as I could be when the power goes out. Generators, yeah, we've got a whole house generator that we put in about 10 years ago, and it seems to work out for us. Have I gotten my investment back on it yet? No, I don't think so. But it's certainly a feel-good, nice insurance to have sitting there. And when it goes through its test cycle on a weekly basis, it's comforting to hear that generator kick in and kick off and know that it's there. We have lost power from time to time, especially during the winter and winter storms and stuff like that. And the generator is there, it kicks on, it can run the whole house. It's a little expensive because it draws quite a lot of natural gas to run it, but it gets you through. It'll save losing food in your freezer. It'll keep you warm. That's the whole point. So with all that said, I'd be very interested to hear what your prepper journey, what difference you would make in your prepper journey to get where you really need to be. Would you move? Would you own a farm? Would you just give it all up and just go live in an apartment? I'm not sure what everybody else is doing, but I wanted to get some dialogue going with respect to alternates, and if you had your prepper journey to start over again, what would you do? So this is the Prepared Suburbanite reminding you to be prepared always, and I'll see you all on the next video.